Welcome in everybody to another episode of Play Like a Jet Live, brought to you by uSTADIUM. I'm Luke. We don't have Clay with us. We have a very special guest. We have Kayla Pace joining us from Play Like a Jet and CBS. So Kayla, thanks so much for being with us. And we also have Andy Vasquez back again from NorthJersey.com. So guys, thanks so much for being with us. What we're going to touch on today, guys, we're going to recap training camp practice today with Andy. Going to mention the Josh Johnson signing. So let's start there, guys. Kayla, I wanted to start with you discussing Josh Johnson. So last time you were on the show, we talked about the importance of a backup quarterback and what that means for Zach Wilson's development. How did you feel about them bringing in Josh Johnson?
I don't think anyone was searching for Josh Johnson as the number one option as a backup in the quarterback room. But at this point in the season, we're going to get what we get. Josh Johnson does have a lot of experience of being in an NFL locker room, not so much actually getting on the field. I was actually looking at this earlier today. He's only had 286 career attempted passes. And Sam Darnold, for reference, if you can't really do the math yourself, 364 just last season. So if you think about that, he's not really experienced on the field, but he's going to bring that air of professionalism. He's a guy that you want around in terms of how to conduct yourself as an NFL player, because teams keep calling him back for a reason. Obviously, he's a good presence. He might not be getting on the field, but it's a good thing to have him in the room. So, I mean, given where we are at this point in the offseason with week one coming up very quickly, I think at this point, he's the right guy. If Saleh likes him, then I'm all for it.
Andy, thanks for joining us again. Josh Johnson, what did you think of the move? Do you think this says something about how Saleh and LaFleur feels about the backup quarterbacks? Where do you think this influences the team?
Well, if anything, it says that they feel good about the guys that they have because, I mean, if you're relying on Josh Johnson to be your bona fide backup going into the regular season, it's not like she just said, it's not really much better than what you already had. So, he has some familiarity in LaFleur's offense because he was in San Francisco, I believe, late last year. He's kind of been everywhere. So he's definitely a proven locker room presence. And that's what they like about him. And to be honest with you, they just, I think, wanted 4 quarterbacks for drill purposes. It gives them some more freedom in the drills. We saw something we hadn't seen today, which was they split into 2 different groups with the receivers and the quarterbacks during individual drills, and that allowed them to get in some more work for the receivers during practice. So I think that's part of what they're doing here. And if one of these guys, Morgan or White, can't prove that they're good enough to be the backup, he could be kind of the emergency option going into the regular season. But, Robert Saleh said today that this isn't going to take away from their opportunities. Jordan's going to get his shot, but it's still going to be prioritizing James Morgan and Mike White's development in the preseason and in these training camp practices.
Andy, let's speak about practice a little more because obviously the pads are on yesterday. You usually get a little lull the next day. That was obviously today. Pads come off a lot more 7-on-7. How did it look today? It sounded like the offense probably got the better of the Jets defense. How did practice go today for the Jets? Yeah,
I would say this was the first practice where the offense really did get the better of them. I was trying to add up the numbers with Zach Wilson. I'm not good at math, especially on the run here, and I should have told them up earlier today. But he had a good day in 11-on-11 drills. I think it was somewhere around 9 for 12. And then where he really shined is the area he's struggled most in so far during camp. On 7-on-7 in the red zone, he went 6 of 7 and really spread the ball around, finding, I think, the tight ends for 5 of those completions. And he found all 4 of the main guys there, Wesco, Griffin, Herndon, and why am I forgetting one of them? I knew that was going to happen, but my mind's just going, obviously, I'm the new guy, Crofts. So, yeah, I mean, they spread the ball around. He looked really decisive in the red zone, and he looked more sharp. I mean, it's been kind of an up and down practice period for Zach Wilson to get started, and that's what we should expect. He's a rookie. He's still absorbing the offense. It's not going to always look pretty, but he's not really stacking bad days and bad throws. I mean, he was awful that first day, but he's been pretty decent since then, and obviously there's room for improvement, but that's what you'd expect here. From the defensive standpoint, they're still getting the job done. Carl Lawson has been great, got another sack today. Bryce Huff has been another guy who's flashed and got high praise from defensive coordinator Matt Ulbrich. So, yeah, I mean, they're really there's been a lot going on here these first 6 practices, and it's only going to get more intense as they get ready for the green and white scrimmage on Saturday and the Giants next week.
Okay, Andy, perfect segue. You just mentioned Carl Lawson, and throughout the last 5 or 6 practices that we've seen so far in training camp, he's all you've heard about on the defensive side of the ball. I was interested to see how it went once the pads came on, and it sounded like yesterday he was just as good, had a couple of would-be sacks. What should our expectations be of Carl Lawson? Because this is a guy who's taking on Mekhi Becton, a top 10 to 12 tackle every single day in training camp, and he's winning decisively. He was top 7 in pressures and those kind of stats last year. So we've seen it on the field already. Is this just Jets fans being hungry because we've had Jordan Jenkins there? Or is this a real chance for Lawson to be a superstar caliber edge?
Well, let's wait and see before we get really excited, because he is a guy who traditionally during the regular season has been kind of like the Leonard Williams model. Obviously, Leonard was on the inside, he's on the outside, but the guy who almost got to the quarterback a bunch of times and didn't. Until he's able to do it in the regular season, we shouldn't get too excited, but it's been a really promising start to the training camp. I mean, I don't think it's going to be this easy for him in the regular season, because I think the Jets are trying to get certain looks, get certain matchups. I think in a different situation, they might make some more adjustments, and Mekhi Becton might be making some more adjustments, but I think they're trying to kind of get used to dealing with that wide speed rusher. And it's been rough for him early in practice, but he says he's taking a lot from it. And the Jets are just really happy with what they have in Lawson in terms of work ethic. I mean, the guy is obsessed with football. He's very determined to perfect his craft, and that's what he's focused on more with results. And that's what Robert Saleh and everyone on this coaching staff talks about all the time, perfecting kind of what you're doing in the moment, not getting caught up in the results, but focusing on the process. So he fits right into that. And that's where the Jets are focused right now. And I hate to be that guy that's like, let's wait and see, but that's the truth. It doesn't really matter until he can do it consistently during the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of switching up from that in terms of let's wait and see, undrafted free agents. I know we've heard a little bit about them, especially when it comes to the secondary, given that it's a little thin there. But is there anyone standing out to you that maybe we haven't heard about, or maybe that we have, that you think has a pretty good shot at making this roster?
Well, there's so many guys out there. There's a ton of guys. I can't remember if DJ Montgomery is an undrafted free agent, obviously, and he's a receiver who is, out of all the guys who aren't directly competing for a starting job, he's the guy who's probably flashed the most during camp. And he's done it in a number of different ways, using his speed to catch a couple of long touchdown passes, using his hands to get up in traffic and make some really good plays. And then solid route running to get open. On a play, I believe it was in the first padded practice on Tuesday, he just got left alone, but ran a perfect route, had another big gain, and then he goes over to the sideline, and Mike LaFleur is there with a big grin and a fist bump. So he's clearly impressed the Jets. I don't know. It's still going to be an uphill battle for him to make the roster with, when you look at what you have there at receiver. But he's a guy who's flashed. And then going to the other side of the ball, not an undrafted player this year, but last year, and now I'm forgetting his name again. I'm just not on my game today, but
Bryce Huff?
The slot corner. I don't know why.
Slot corner.
Javelin
Javelin
Guidry. So he's been really good. Him and Michael Carter II, they've both got a lot of time with the first team, and they're both proving that they're kind of, the Jets may be more set at that spot than we thought. I think there's significant questions on the outside, and nobody has kind of claimed those spots. We saw Brandon Echols working with the first team today outside, but on the inside, Carter and Guidry have really done a nice job, and both of them have flashed during training camp. And I think you got to be excited with where they're going.
Some of the higher profile guys now, Andy, we've heard a heck of a lot about the Jets' first pick in Zach Wilson. There's been a lot of chatter about their third pick in Elijah Moore, but it's been a quiet training camp for Elijah Vera Tucker, and playing the guard position, I don't think that's a negative. I understand he missed practice today. So give us some insight on how Vera Tucker's looked so far in his first training camp, and obviously what held him out of camp today.
Yeah, so it's obviously hard to evaluate these guys without the benefit of going back to watch the tape, which we can't do because we're not allowed to videotape most of practice, and when they're not in pads. So unless something's very obvious, it's hard to see. And Vera Tucker has only been in pads once, and that happened yesterday, and he suffered a pectoral injury. It's not serious. Robert Saleh said he's day-to-day. He'll probably be back out there quite soon, but obviously that's a little bit of a concern. But he's looked every bit the part. The fact that, like you said, his name hasn't been coming up because he hasn't been getting beat regularly, that's a good sign. So he definitely is a guy who has maturity that is beyond his years. He looks, in the interview room, he was a guy who looks like he belongs, looks like he's not intimidated by the situation, had a lot of thoughtful things to say about, his development and his situation. And I think the Jets feel really good about him, but we're going to really know once they start putting together some of these consecutive padded practices. He's going to have to stay on the field, obviously, and we'll really start to know when they get to those preseason games and the joint practices. But a little bit of a concern moving forward, always with an offensive lineman and a pectoral injury. But Robert Saleh says it's not serious day-to-day, so we should see him back on the field soon.
All right, kind of a 180 here to the players that everyone's talking about, the wide receiver group. Obviously, there's been some, controversy on Jets Twitter. People like to overreact and get all up in arms.
No.
But yeah, I didn't have to tell you that. But so there's obviously the whole Denzel Mims situation. People are starting to get worried about him. As somebody who's done this for a while, covered these practices, do you think that there's an element of, especially so early on in camp, people who are struggling to just learn the system as opposed to players that just aren't skilled? I mean, could this be a case of Mims is struggling systematically, or is it just that he can't keep up with other people skill-wise?
So if you listen to Mike LaFleur, what he told us today is that it doesn't matter where these guys are getting reps. Obviously, the guys like Crowder and Corey Davis are going to get almost all of their reps with the first team just because they're vets. But he said beyond that, we're not setting up the reps based on first, second team, third. We're setting it up on matchups we want to see, routes we want to have guys run, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know how much I buy all that. It's a little bit of both. I mean, I don't think it's been an accident that he's been running with the third team. We're seeing Elijah Moore with the first team a lot, and he's a new guy. So I think it's a combination of a couple things. He's learning a new system. He was only on the practice field 4 or 5 times during OTAs because he was dealing with that non-COVID related illness. So, he's not quite up to speed. And if you listen to Saleh and LaFleur talk, it's a work in progress. And LaFleur said today that he's putting together better practices. He's heading in the right direction. So if he's running with the seconds and thirds exclusively a week from now, as you're going into the Giants game, it's going to be a bigger deal. But it's still early enough where, it may be some of that. They're just trying to get matchups and get him work and get him acclimated to the system. So too early to freak out yet. I know that goes against everything that we, see on social media, but it bears watching. It's definitely not something that people are making up in their minds. He's 6th or 7th on the depth chart right now, but it's very early and there's time to fix that. And it would be hard to imagine a situation where he's not on the roster. So that's the bottom line. The Jets aren't going to cut a 2nd round pick almost certainly a year after drafting him, especially a guy who showed some potential last year, even if not the consistency you wanted to see. So it's going to be a little bit of a process. It may take him a little longer to get in, but he's in a better spot now than he was a year ago when he wasn't really even on the field.
All right, I've got a question for both of you now. And Kayla, I'm going to start with you. So obviously we discussed before we went on air that we haven't been able to get to training camp, me living in Australia, you just missed the tickets. Who's a name, though, from the buzz online and what the beat reporters like Andy are saying, who's a name that stood out to you and gone, that actually surprised me that he's doing so well? That's someone I didn't expect to have an impact in training camp. Has there been a name that's flashed across your screen that's taken you by surprise?
That's a tough one. I think, honestly, what I've been more surprised by is lack of names popping up. because I feel like the show has been all about Elijah Moore at this point, or Lawson, and like those are the names that you see over and over again. But I'm still expecting to see plays from guys like Jamison Crowder. Like he's out there, he's taking reps. Like, why am I not hearing more about it? Is it just that people are less excited about it, or is it because he's just not showing up as much? This maybe isn't the spot for him. I don't know what it is, but I was expecting to see more of a variety, and I think it's more that I'm surprised that I'm just seeing like this one note thing. And again, Jets Twitter likes to focus in on a couple of things and go really hard at it, as hard as they can. But I do think that I was expecting to see a little bit more excitement around the board instead of just on a couple of players.
You mentioned Bryce Huff, Andy. Is he a guy that stood out to you and maybe surprised you? What's your take on guys that have maybe stood out in camp?
So that's a good example, and I'm sure everybody will crush me for calling the defensive coordinator Matt. I'm sorry, I'm working on like 4 hours of sleep here. Jeff Ulbrich said today that that's a guy that he is really pulling forward to make the 53-man roster, and that if he didn't make the roster, he would like do everything he could to make sure that he found a spot somewhere else. So that's about as high praise as you can get from your defensive coordinator. He had a sack in the padded practice yesterday, beating Morgan Moses. And he's a guy who flashed last year too, so he's progressing. John Franklin Myers, I believe, had a batted ball today in practice and has looked pretty good. Sheldon Rankins is probably like the funniest press conference on the team, and I don't know how much of that was posted to the Jets website because there were a lot of swear words. He did say "pardon my French" before he dropped it, which made it even better. But yeah, but the funniest one was when he said, about the defensive line. And don't worry, I won't swear. But about the defensive line, he said, I've played with some dudes before, and the guys we got in here, pardon my French, but teams better buckle their stuff. And I mean, it's funny. He's got a lot of personality, and he's been solid. Hasn't been getting to the quarterback as much, but seems to be doing a good job in the run game. Kayla going with Jamison Crowder, actually, he's looked pretty good. It's just, I think it's one of those things where Jets fans are so used to him, it hasn't stood out. But a couple of, I don't know if he's lighter, but he's moving really well. He looks more agile and just more explosive than he did last year. And obviously he was hurt a lot of last year, but we saw in that first game in Buffalo what he can do when he gets the ball in his hands. And he's done some of that in training camp. I think he had a 60-plus yard gain the other day. And he's been outside of Moore, probably the guy who's been most involved in the offense. We've had our yearly Chris Herndon sighting. He's been working his way up from the second team mostly to start camp. Now he's splitting reps from, as far as I can tell, with Croft with the first team. He made a couple of nice touchdown grabs in the red zone 2 days ago. Kind of had a quiet first padded practice, but had another nice catch today in the 7-on-7 red zone for a touchdown. The running backs, I mean, they've all looked pretty good. LaFleur said that Tevin Coleman is back to what he was before that injury-riddled year last year. So it's hard to tell with the run game at this stage, but that's something to watch going forward. And then with the cornerbacks, Bryce Hall has been solid. Bless Austin, it's been, what you'd expect, generally solid play with every few plays mixed in there. He kind of just gets beat. I already talked about the slot corners. And then going with CJ Mosley, he's lost a significant amount of weight. He's down. This is a guy who played in the 250s at linebacker and was kind of, not your coverage linebacker. He could do it, but it wasn't the emphasis. In this defense, he realized he's going to be asked to do a lot more coverage. And so he dropped about 20 pounds. He's down to 231. He's moving around as fast as Saleh said he's ever seen him move. And that's going to be something to watch because the Jets are going to need him to do that in coverage because they don't have a lot of guys who can do that both in the linebacking core. And it makes up for some of the deficiencies they have with the defensive backs. So those are just some of the things that have jumped to mind. Mosley hasn't necessarily stood out and been making these game-breaking plays like we saw in that Buffalo game 2 years ago, but he's been solid. He's moving well, looks healthy, and didn't seem to be hesitant in pads yesterday. So that should be exciting for Jets fans too.
I think the biggest thing for me, Andy, and I'm sure you see this as well, is last year in the offseason, people were talking about the quality and caliber of Jets training camp and Jets practices as almost unrecognizable in terms of an NFL team. The green and white scrimmage was horrible. The ones just got destroyed by the second team. So it's nice to see some of these guys competing and playing at a much higher level. I think we've actually broken a record, guys. We haven't discussed Zach Wilson or Elijah Moore yet, and we're 25 minutes into the show. So that's pretty impressive. I wanted to finish there with you, Andy. Talk to me about Zach Wilson, because when we talked last week, he hadn't signed yet. It sounds, reading reports that you do and a number of other guys, that Zach Wilson has been fairly solid, had the great day in practice, the first open training session, and then was kind of average a couple of days in the middle and was better today. Has he been fairly, what you'd expect for a rookie quarterback? What's his development and progress been like so far?
Yeah, that first practice, like I said, was rough. But again, the guy hadn't practiced in 6 weeks. He's going up against a defense that is a couple days of practice on it already. It's moving fast. And he's trying to figure everything out on that first day. So I think whenever his first day was going to be, it probably wasn't going to look like it did in the spring, maybe when, he had already absorbed the whole offense at the end and was able to kind of deal with some of that adversity. The way he responded both in his press conference, he wasn't rattled at all. Basically said, like, this is going to happen, and it's all these mistakes are an opportunity to learn. And then on the field that next day at practice, and he's been generally solid since. It hasn't been like what we saw in the spring where he's just lighting it up, but this is tougher than the spring. The defense is further along. Guys now know that every snap they're taking is, are they going to make this team? Are they not going to make this team? The intensity is way up, and the speed is faster as you get closer to regular season games. So, I thought Sunday's or Monday's practice was pretty good until he made just a horrible decision during 7-on-7 red zone drills and threw an interception to Bless Austin. Other than that, a pretty good day. And then today, yeah, he was solid. I mean, especially to see him make that progress in the 7-on-7 in the red zone, and he's clearly seeing the field better, making better decisions. He threw it away the one time when there was nothing there instead of making that same mistake. That's the kind of progress you want to see. And there will be more bad practices ahead and more bad decisions, but he's a rookie, and that's what you expect. And people get annoyed when I say, like, he's going to mess up, and it's okay. I'm not going to, sugarcoat his day just because people want to feel good about it, but it's okay if he has a bad day. It's really the truth. It's okay. He's going to have some bad games during the regular season too, probably. That's what happens to rookie quarterbacks. So I think he's right where you want him to be, and there's no reason to be discouraged when he does have a bad day.
Andy, last thing before I let you run, we already mentioned Elijah Vera Tucker and his injury. Who else is banged up around the Jets right now? Obviously, there was a scary one yesterday, but who isn't on the field right now?
Yeah, Cam Clark isn't on the field. He had that scary neck injury. Now he's going to be okay, as the Jets put out there. It was a spinal cord contusion. Robert Saleh said that he and Joe Douglas visited him at Morristown Medical Center on Tuesday night, and that Clark was supposed to get out of the hospital today. Saleh doesn't know when he'll be back on the field. Jabari Zuniga has a quad injury, and that could the Jets are hoping that it's going to be day to day. And Chuma Edoga is dealing with a knee injury that might take a little bit more time to get back from. Saleh wasn't as specific on the timetable. And then, of course, out of the other guys we talked about last week, who's kind of going to be out a little bit longer term, Quinnen Williams is still on track to be back in 2 weeks before the Packers game, and he's progressing in his on-field work. Saleh said that earlier this week in practice he was starting to mix him into individual drills, so that's a step in the right situation. A step in the right direction, and hopefully the Jets maybe could get him back even a little earlier. I don't think you'll see him in that Giants game, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was doing more in practice next week.
Andy, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you, as always. Make sure you're following all of Andy's work at northjersey.com. Appreciate you, man, and fingers crossed we'll talk to you in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy. Kayla, I wanted to transition now into the other name we hadn't mentioned, and that's Elijah Moore. So Jets fans have been starving for good wide receiver play really since the 2015 season. How excited are you when you read these reports and the highlights we're seeing about Elijah Moore and just what that's going to do for the Jets receiving group?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, a lot of what the Jets have been lacking is that fire on offense. Even in the past few seasons when they've been down and they've been a not very good team, their defense has still managed to come up and make some big plays and have some kind of impact on the field. It's been the offense that it's a wild card, and maybe they score a touchdown on the first drive of the game and then do nothing, or maybe it's just some garbage time touchdown at the very end, but doesn't mean anything anymore. So it's been a while since we've seen meaningful, consistent offense from the Jets. I feel like the last game I saw where I thought the offense was good was in 2015, like the last one that I attended. And I was at the Jets-Patriots overtime Eric Decker touchdown game. So, I mean, that's like a hard one to live up to anyway, but I haven't gone to any games where I've left feeling good about the Jets offense. And I certainly haven't watched any in my house either. So I'm really excited to have a player that, I mean, and honestly, you think about it, if you have a young kid that's a Jets fan, they don't want to watch this team if there's no exciting skill player to watch. It's good for everybody. It's good for the team, obviously, to win games. It's good for the fans who want to pay attention. It's good for people to like get excited about the Jets if maybe they weren't before. And so without like that superstar player, it's really hard to draw people in. So I think it's going to be great all around. It's going to be a lot of fun for those of us who have hung on through the tough years and deserve to watch somebody fun.
I was really worried about the corner group on the other side of the ball coming into camp, just how young and inexperienced they were. We didn't see great play out of Bless Austin last year, but it sounds like they're doing a pretty good job. Bryce Hall, obviously I expected to be the corner one, but it sounds like Pinnock and Eccles and those kind of guys have had a really nice camp. How are you feeling about the Jets secondary? I think they're going to be helped a lot by the pass rush. It's going to make their job a lot easier. But what's your overall feeling as a fan and someone that analyzes and looks at the Jets about the secondary?
Yeah, so I think obviously we were all nervous going into it. I think, though, that what we're seeing from camp and at least what we're reading about online is all good things. And I think that obviously they're going to mess up. They're a young group. And I think, though, that the investment that Douglas and Saleh made into late round secondary players is going to pay off because they picked a bunch of guys that are super athletic. I know we talked about this some on draft night as well, but they picked a bunch of guys with really high athletic upside. And if you get a bunch of super athletic guys in a room that are competing against each other, they're going to go up and make big plays and they're going to challenge each other and someone's going to have to beat the rest of them out. And so hopefully that turns into a player that becomes a guy that you can rely on the field and they can stick into an actual game situation when we're out of practice and it's no longer about who's competing for that spot. It's about who earned it and who's going to go out there and show that they are continuing to earn it every week. And I think that if you bring in those skill set guys, someone's got to come out on top. And I like the way that it's looking right now.
Someone who got to see that firsthand today was our next guest. He's the co-founder of uSTADIUM, where we're being streamed from today. And that's Nick Spano. Nick, how you going, man? You're at training camp at Florham Park today. How you doing? And what did it look like today from a fan's perspective?
Going good, guys. Appreciate you having me on. And it was just really cool to kind of get out there again and see live football in action and get to see, even though they weren't in pads or, they really weren't hitting or anything, but it was just good to see the football being played, live. So it was cool to be there to see, the new staff and some of the new faces. So overall, it was a really cool day.
I know you tweeted about him this morning, and Kayla and I just had a discussion about Elijah Moore. How good did he look, just as far as movement skills and fluidity and just kind of that feel in zone you talked about? How did it look seeing it in person?
Yeah, it's crazy to say because I was there and, talking to a few people and I was like, he's the best player on the field and he's 6 weeks into his NFL career, right? With, mini camps, rookie camps. So it's crazy to think that. And, as Jet fans, we haven't really seen an offensive player kind of, take over the scene here. And man, who knows? I can't even think of the last young player to do that. But it seems like he's running at a different speed and, he just is super fluid. It looks very easy to him. It's very, his motion is just it's a level up from really the rest of the guys out there. And it's not a knock on like a Corey Davis or a Crowder, but he just seems to kind of have a different gear and he's always open and Wilson knows it. You could tell all of his big plays, it seems like, Zach Wilson so far, these flashy highlight plays are going to Elijah Moore. It's no coincidence, right? So he feels comfortable throwing to him. He knows he'll be at that spot where he's going to put the football. He just has that extra gear to kind of get past the defensive backs. And overall, you almost just kind of have to take a step back. You don't want to get ahead of yourself here and thinking how good this guy could be, right out of the gate. But he is, to me, he was the best player on the field today. And definitely on the offensive side of the ball. Tough because, like I said, there was no pads really, and they're still not really hitting or doing too much. But just that extra level of speed, or just kind of that, like his ease of motion is the way to put it, is really cool to see, and he's exciting, man.
Kayla and I were also just talking about the 2015 Jets, and Chan Gailey, it's almost like he banned tight ends from catching the football. And that's kind of what I expected this season as well. But it sounded from all reports like the tight ends actually had a pretty good day today, especially in the red zone.
You could tell that they want to use them. Do we have the quality of, the talent on the roster? I think that's where the difference is going to be here, is because they want to use the tight ends and they try to, and especially in the 7-on-7s, which you can't take too much out of, I guess. But, you could tell Wilson was looking for them. And I think Croft caught one, I think, maybe even Griffin. And I think Herndon had one. But the offense, I mean, the tight end, that mismatch, you're always looking for mismatch, right? You're looking for your matchups. And that tight end can be a special one if you have the quality of talent on the roster. The Jets don't have that right now, but you can tell why George Kittle is so good and was so good in that system, right? Yeah, he's a elite tight end and all pro, but this system allows for that tight end to make plays. And if there was one, there will be the opportunity for one of these guys to do it. I just don't know if any of these guys that they currently have on the roster, can take that torch. Obviously you're not going to beat George Kittle, but, can have the opportunities that he had in this offense. But they're trying. Like, you could tell that they were trying to work. I know even Mike White, I think it was Mike White, had a really nice seam, up the seams to one of the tight ends. It might have been Daniel Brown or Griffin on the second team. But, they're trying to get the tight ends the ball. The opportunity's there. It's just, I don't know if any of these guys are really good enough to kind of make that difference.
Kayla, the thing that excites me most about the preseason is what this Jets offense is going to look like, because there's been so much discussion. Are the Jets going to play 12 and 21 personnel heavy like the 49ers did? Are they going to play like the Rams in 11 personnel? Nick just said the tight ends played really well today. I just can't wait to see how these pieces fit together, because I really don't know what this scheme's going to look like. Are you excited to see the development and how Mike LaFleur puts these pieces together, Kayla?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know right before Nick hopped on, I was just talking about the corners and how I think that they're going to make each other better and become more of a solid unit than we expected. But another thing that we have to consider is that these receivers that the Jets only have these corners to play against right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what that translates like when they get onto the field against some true CB1s that maybe the Jets don't have right now. I mean, it's still to be determined, but you have to look at that and think, all right, yeah, these guys look like they're playing really well, but that's against each other. So once they match up with other people, I think that's going to be the real question, and that'll bring a lot more to light than what we're actually seeing right now at camp.
Kayla mentioned CB1, Nick. I know Bryce Hall was with the twos today. That's just about getting rep distribution. How did Brandon Eccles look? Because he was with the first team, and 7-on-7, you get a pretty good idea for corners. How did Eccles look in your first look at him live?
What was surprising is that Eccles looked pretty good. Unfortunately, he was the recipient of the Elijah Moore dust show he put him in on that one throw. So these guys in the NFL now, these guys are so fast that you can't just, you want to say, oh, he got burnt, he sucks. I mean, it's not the case. I thought they battled, and they look very overall, the entire team looks fast and they look aggressive. So you're seeing even Bless Austin, who I've been kind of tough on since he's gotten here. I thought he looked pretty good today. I was pretty impressed. He's big, man, and he's physical. So if that's the one thing that I guess, Ulbrich and Saleh and the defensive back coach, if that's the one thing that they're really, putting on these guys is get up, get aggressive, get your hands in there, tug, grab while you can until you get flagged. But to me, I thought the entire group, Eccles, another guy, and I heard Andy talking about Vera Tucker. When you don't hear an offensive lineman's name, it's usually a good thing. I didn't see anybody, again, besides for that one more throw, where you're like, man, this guy's getting smoked out there. So I thought it was good competition all the way around. That was the one thing I'll take, from watching practice, and what you can see really in an unpadded kind of, light atmosphere, is that the dudes are definitely competing. And I know everything's usually always positive in training camp, and you want to think good thoughts, and everybody looks good, and until you get out there and you really see it on Saturdays in the preseason and Sundays. But I think this team as a whole is going to really adopt that mantra from Saleh: is scrappy, fast, tough, aggressive. They're going to get in your face, whether that's the D-line just kind of pinning their ears back and getting after the quarterback, or these secondary guys kind of playing aggressive and trying to make a play. If the 4-man rush can't get there, these guys are going to be in trouble back there. But if they try and play aggressive and make plays on the ball, they should come up with a few on their end, where the Jets' past secondaries in the past few years really have kind of just gotten picked apart, and they haven't even really been turnover friendly guys back there. But I thought it was a good kind of. I didn't see much of the slot guys. I heard Andy talking about like Guidry and MC2. I didn't really pay too much attention. I mean, it's tough because everything's so kind of clogged into one area. But I did notice the two outside guys looked pretty strong, and obviously, Bryce Hall playing with the twos really held his own. Like, you could tell the level of that drop in competition from the receiver one, the first team, to the second team. Hall was just kind of all over. So I think he's going to be a strong player for the Jets, and I was pleasantly surprised about Eccles and Bless Austin today.
So we're, I think, 10 days away from preseason football now, which is incredible because it's been so long since the fans have been able to go to a Jets game. It's so exciting. Question for both of you to finish off the show. What are you most looking forward to seeing during preseason games? Is it the pass rush? Is it seeing Carl Lawson? Is it seeing Zach Wilson? What is it? Starting with you, Nick, what are you most looking forward to seeing in the first preseason game against the Giants?
Yeah, I think the one thing to mention, too, about the practice today, and it was what we all complained about with Darnold and the coaching staff forever, was they took what Darnold was best at and they pretty much scrapped it. Adam Gase did, was getting him moving out of the pocket. These off-platform throws, there was a lot of that today. A lot of play action, a lot of bootlegs, a lot of, getting Wilson out of the pocket, getting him out of that, the trenches in there. So I really like that. I'm excited to see. I'm weird, but I want to see I want to see LaFleur's system in place. I want to see the trenches, the O-line and the D-line. I'm super excited about the two tackles, Vera Tucker, how McGovern's going to translate in this system, and then that pressure, that 4-man different rotation on the D-line is going to be. And you go and you expect a little bit of a growing pains with the secondary. So hopefully everybody's a little bit, has their expectations tempered a bit there. So, you want to see them compete. That's really what it is, what it's all about. And obviously staying healthy in the preseason. But another group, and not to get off topic again, Kayla, sorry, I'm taking all your shine here. I thought I'm going to say 5 because I thought Josh Adams looked good too. I thought all of the running backs looked really good today. Michael Carter, it's a weird comparison because I said it to someone there and they're like, I don't know about that. I saw some like Maurice Jones-Drew. I know he's a smaller dude. Jones-Drew is stockier, but he's got that low center of gravity. He's tough to bring down. Great vision, and he does have that surprising like little burst where you really didn't see too much of it in UNC. I thought he was all over the place. He was great. I thought Coleman had a few really nice runs. He looked fast. And Michael Pirine is in really good shape, dude. He's built. He took on, I don't know if it was Zane Lewis or some other corner, tried to come up and make a play, and he basically like truck sticked him. And then Ty Johnson was there. You could tell they're trying to get him more involved in the pass game coming out of the backfield, really running more off tackle with him. They're not trying to, run him up in between any of the interior guys. But it seems like they have a role carved out for each one of them do a lot of different things. Because I went in there like, you can tell they want to run the ball. Obviously, the Shanahan system is predicated on the run. So I went in there watching that specifically, and I thought I came away pretty impressed. So that's an exciting group too. But yeah, it's really just like the competition level and seeing, LaFleur's system kind of be put into place and see how it translates.
Kayla, what about you?
So I think Nick kind of took some of the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry about that.
I want to see the offensive line and the defensive line. I'm sure we're not going to get so much of the full group in the preseason at this point. But those are the position groups I'm most excited to see how they've improved and what's going to be coming from them this season. And then the lover of a good underdog story in me really just wants to see some undrafted free agents like make their name out there. I think that's like the best part of the preseason, because at the end of the day, preseason football is not that great. Like, you go out there and you watch your rookies and you watch some guys that like are maybe fringe players, and you hope that somebody makes a big play to get them on the team. And that's honestly like the fun part to me, at least. I like to go to the last preseason game where everyone who's starting week 1 is sitting down and it's just all these guys are taking like their last shots to make this team. Yeah. I think that's the fun part. So call me corny. Maybe it's a little sentimental. Who knows? But I like it.
I agree.
My favorite memory in the last 10 years of Jets fandom was Christian Hackenberg's first drive for the Jets. That was number one for me. So I disagree. That's just nothing's better than the preseason. But you're right. It's great hearing, the Jets always played Philadelphia the last week of the preseason, hearing Mike Mayock when he was commentating their games talk about all these roster bubble guys. It is so exciting seeing them fight for playing time. And even though it's not the real thing, it's pretty close. And it's the closest thing we've had for 8 or 9 months for Jets football. So guys, that'll just about do us for Play Like a Jet Live this week. Kayla, I really appreciate you coming on and hosting with us today. Nick, thank you for jumping on.
Sure.
Guys, make sure you're watching, commenting, subscribing, and all the other shows across the uSTADIUM network. 49ers have a terrific show. I know Splash is over on the Packers show quite a lot. Make sure you're checking out Timeout with Nick. There's tons of great content on our Play Like a Jet site as well. Articles on the website, on our YouTube channel, breakdowns on all the rookies. Make sure you're not missing any of that content. Thanks again for joining us, guys. 7:15 p.m. every Wednesday night. Play Like a Jet Live. We'll see you next week.